Welcome back. Today we're going to take a look at Moondrop Aria Snow Edition. So Moondrop Aria, of course, is a almost legendary set at this point. There aren't that many sets in the budget under $100 category that really had the longevity that Aria has. And people still talk about it now. People still use it, still listen to it. It's quite an amazing set. Quite a reputation. So the Snow Edition, I think, was something that caught everyone's eye, including me. Are they going to improve on such a legendary set? And I will say that they changed Aria, not so much. I wouldn't call it necessarily better or worse. It's just a different Aria than what most people had purchased over the past year or so. So this is the case that it comes in. It says Aria Snow Edition. Inside, this is the box as well. So kind of nice packaging. Inside, you do get the very popular Moondrop spring tips, which are actually quite nice. I actually like the spring tips, and I do like the spring tips on this set as well because of the deep fit that you get. So up close, the Snow Edition does have a sort of fancy snowflake pattern on it, which may or may not come through on video. It looks like it'll be okay. The rest of it, I think they got rid of the painted shell and sort of settled on this raw metal. It's probably coated in something, but probably not going to have the paint chipping that you saw on the original Aria. So quite nice. Cable itself is kind of nice. It's kind of a thin, I don't know if that's typical Moondrop, but not too bad. It's okay. So let's kind of jump into it. And I think there's really almost there's sort of two issues, and I almost had the same issues with the original Aria and why I never bought it originally. There was always a couple things that I read in certain reviews where I said, yeah, I'm just not sure that set is something that I needed to purchase because it's got a couple issues that didn't really appeal to me. And I think Aria Snow Edition is going to be very much in line with the same kind of concept of my review sort of is bookended by two issues, and the two issues are either going to be not an issue for you or maybe an issue, maybe one of them will be, but really number 1 and number 8 are really two things that I will call issues with the Snow Edition, and we'll kind of get to them, but let's start with number 1. And I think for the most part, number 1 is going to be the absolute most important one to really consider is the Snow Edition too lean for you? And so if we look at what they really did on the signature frequency graph, or how Aria Snow Edition changed from the original Aria, you can kind of see the blue line is where the Aria stock is, and the red line, which we'll talk about in a minute, is actually quite close to where the original Aria is. So you can see they actually brought down the bass from almost 200 back. They brought it back, a probably good 5 dB, maybe it's 6 dB, maybe it's 7, maybe it's 6.5. It's somewhere in that ballpark. It's actually quite a bit of change. And bringing this down, makes these sort of leaner, cleaner, a more mid-focus set. And people are going to be attracted to that. Other people are going to say, well, no, I actually like a warmer set, and perhaps the original Aria is probably more for me. But when I pulled it out of the box, I definitely thought of Junu's Titan S. And I was actually surprised that they brought it down a little cleaner, a little leaner than what Titan S is. And I thought Titan S was sort of borderline too lean. And so to drop Snow Edition back a little bit below Titan S, I will definitely say that this one is very much on the border, and I will call it generously on the border just because of, and we'll get to it in probably number 3, but if you couldn't change it and you couldn't add any more bass to it easily, I probably would have said it's probably a bit too lean, and it probably generally is a bit too lean, but very much know what you are buying. This is not a warm, bassy set, not even a warm, bassy set like the original Aria. This is a leaner, cleaner, and I do think about it in terms of the theme that they used. This whole Snow Edition kind of evokes this colder, sharper, clear as ice sound. Very much think about that. That is what it sounds like. This is not a warm, bassy, blondish, or even the original Aria sound. This is not quite cold as ice, but it's kind of getting there. I think that they picked a theme perfectly for this one and how it sounds. And this one will very much appeal to detail people, speed people, people who are really much attracted to that in their tracks, and not so much for people who like meat on notes and kind of a heavier, more bodied sound. That's not what Snow Edition is. So for me, it really was a tricky balance, and it's pulled off a little better with a more analog sounding source. If you hook the setting up to something that's too neutral or maybe even too bright on maybe a dongle that you have, I think it's just going to play into this leanness, and you're just going to kind of compound a problem. And I'm not sure I would do that. I would definitely go for something that's a little warmer source, a little more analog sounding source. So what does it sound like? It really does have this mid-centric, lean, clean, sharp, transparent, very open sounding, with a mid-upper kind of balance to it. It's just a solid set. I don't think the gist of Aria's very solid tuning, great build, a set that you can just pick up and play almost any genre. I think they sort of kept a lot of those basics intact, but this one is definitely not all that far from Titan S and Signature. It's just a leaner sound from, I think, your previous, the original OG Aria. So mids and lower treble definitely push forward a bit. They're definitely a bit in your face. They're real intensity to them. They're quite engaging in musicality as well, kind of really up there, but a little bit in your face. And it's very much mid-driven rather than bass-driven. If you find yourself in your library as sort of bass-heavy and you kind of nod your head to bass, Snow Edition probably is a bit too lean for you. Think about being driven by listening to vocals or instruments right in that midsection. That's sort of where Aria's the Snow Edition sweet spot is going to be. Definitely not for people who like really warm sets as well. So as I mentioned, the Thunder Snow Edition, and actually we can see what it is right here. So if you have a piece of micro pour tape, so micro pour tape is about $3 for the roll or so. It's called micro pour because it does have little small pores, so it's not completely blocking the airflow to this vent right here, but it does block enough airflow to actually give you a little more bass, and about 5 dB of bass as well. So if we look at the graph again, you can sort of see where the Snow Edition brings you right back up. That's actually very close to where Aria, the original OG, was. So I think having that option is actually really great, and this one sort of makes it more versatile than Titan S. Titan S has vents that you couldn't cover because they have a sort of alternate, more complicated venting system. I think I actually tried it. So having the ability to kind of go between, sort of bounce around the borders of where Titan S is, something that's even leaner and cleaner, and something that's more like the OG, I think it does make the Snow Edition a little more versatile. And that's why I'm not going to be super hard on it being too lean and not usable. I think you can definitely easily change this one by putting almost anything over that vent and give you a little more bass that sounds something like the Thunder Snow Edition. So I think that's a huge win right there. So not many budget sets open the mids like this one, and it really doesn't take much to hear the DD struggle. And what I mean by that is this mid-centric tuning, and it's very open sounding, and it's a little bit forward, it's a bit in your face. It's really all out there. There's not too much haze. It's very transparent in the mids. And that transparency sort of lets you focus on some of the flaws as well. So you get a lot of, I think there's a lot of benefit to it, but I thought it was kind of scary that you're really exposing that much of the midsection. And I think it does quite well here and is very price appropriate, but ultimately you can sort of hear where the resolution starts to break down, where complex tracks start to run together and maybe smear together. It's still a 1DD, and I think this is one of these occasions where if you really want to know why people upgrade to hybrids and tribrids, this is a great example of sort of hearing where this technology and this driver class at this price sort of runs its course, and you need to either upgrade down or upgrade up through the Moondrop line into a more expensive dynamic driver that handles those transitions and those details and that resolution in a better way, or a hybrid system where you really want to step up and not hear a DD struggle on complex passages because you have a balanced armature or a tribrid or some other driver configuration that really is the sweet spot for that. But for me, I was kind of blown away by how open the mids are, and I think that is very much a testament to what they thought that they were putting together. And let's be proud about it and put it out there for people to hear, and they'll really get a sample of what this thing can do and probably think about upgrading to another Moondrop in the future simply because of what they hear here. But yeah, it sort of sounds like a negative, but it's very much a positive in my book of what they really did and putting the tuner out there so people can hear it and understand it and hear when a complex track doesn't quite sound right. You really get a sense for, yeah, if that really bothered me, I would probably pursue a more expensive Moondrop. It's definitely a sort of a teaser for buying a more expensive Moondrop set. I will say that. I think it's almost a brilliant marketing move that they didn't intend it to be a marketing move. So the bass on this guy, like I said, it's a bit low. It's a bit lean. These are really just enough levels on the bass on this one, but nice quality if you focus on it and listen to it. It's just sort of sitting there right below the mids. It's nothing that you're really going to notice until you really focus on it, but very much there to just support the mids and the transition to the mids, and I think it actually does that quite well. But bassier genres, anything with any kind of real meat in the bass will probably need a mod or OG. This is like your jazz style bass, really just enough there to really support the mids and keep the mids super clean, just enough weight so everything sounds a bit more natural, and that's exactly what it does. So the mids, very much the focus here, like I said, engaging and transparent and open and clean, kind of a bit too in your face is what I would call it. It's really close in and not, it almost sounds a bit unrefined because it's so close. I just wish they had pushed it back just a hair and it would sound just a little bit more natural. It sounds just a little bit too elevated, and I call that Moondrop natural, and I think that's the way some of their sets tend to come off. And you can see Titan actually did something really similar. This bit right here at 3K, it's just a hair too much. It's just a hair too much in your face. Just push it down just a slight bit, and I think it would have helped in there. But I think that's very much a Moondrop move, so I'm not going to pick on him too much for it. But it's actually a really quite nice signature as long as you're kind of into that Moondrop sound. Again, it's not too hard to hear the driver limitations and resolution and speed and micro details on this one. It's a really great example of hearing the difference between sort of a less expensive, and this is not all that less expensive at about $80. It's not that cheap for a dynamic driver, but when you step up in price to more expensive dynamic drivers and then hybrids, you could really hear a difference in a lot of those micro details and the resolution and how this driver handles really some of those complex parts. But and I think just based on that, this one, very much like the original, isn't going to be a giant killer. It's very much at its price point. It is a class-leading set at that price point, but it probably doesn't take on that many sets above the price point. But still, a very nice upgrade from a budget set, and then sort of a intermediate stop on your way to a more expensive Moondrop is what I will call it. And I think that's the way a lot of it worked for variations in that way. I think people sort of got attracted to the sound and the quality and how good Moondrop tuning can be, and that was just sort of a stepping stone to a more expensive Kato or a variations. So I get it. Treble, very nice balance from low to high, and I think Moondrop does that well almost all the time. Even if you think about Moondrop Chew, I think you had that lower bit that was actually elevated quite a bit, and then it sort of arced over, and it was actually quite nice. And this one isn't all that far from that in sound on treble. It's just kind of a nice smooth transition. Really hard to find faults at higher volume. Again, you have that bump at about 3K, just like you did on Chew. That's going to, depending on what your volume level will get to you, not get to you. It's actually not bad at all for me. Just fun and dynamic, and it never really seems to fatigue. And I know some people said they got fatigued on Chew, but it didn't really bother me. And I think this one is even less so. I think they kind of nailed that level of providing detail and level and presence without ever falling over into a fatigue level at all. So the second nitpick, once you get past whether you decide if it's too lean for you or not, I think the stage is kind of good for the price, and it's got good height and width, but it sounds very much between your ears. And it was the part that I sort of couldn't wrap my head around why they did it this way. Was it intentional? The stage, it doesn't really have any depth. It's very much right there in your face. And I wish they had just pushed it back just a slight bit. It needs some depth to, be a little more relaxed. And I think slight tweaks to the mids and treble probably would have pushed it beyond its price. But as it sits, I think it sounds about price appropriate. I think the stage alone would sort of put it at the price. And this leanness, again, is going to put it at its price as well. So, yeah, it's kind of a tough one. And I think when I think about the original Aria, I would think about two items like that, which were kind of similar. They were different, but there's just two issues that I probably wouldn't get off the fence. I would probably be borderline deciding whether to buy this one or not. And this leanness in the stage very much would put me on the fence on this one as well. So, but on the other hand, again, I think they had to leave something for the more expensive sets for Kato and above. And I'm sure the stage is actually better on the more expensive sets. So, can't really nitpick them too hard. But as far as, it is a class leading at its price, but is it the best set at its price? Or even some lower? I think some other sets, especially the same price and lower, probably do stage better than Aria Snow does. But for me, again, like, this is one of these small things that I usually don't push to the end of the review, but why I didn't mention any standout tracks here is a lot to do with the stage. This is very much a great playback set, but it's not necessarily a great experience set. And for me, I think this one sort of fell short in that area, especially on the stage. It does fine playback. It sounds quite natural, and people are going to enjoy it, but it doesn't necessarily take me on a ride. And I can enjoy listening to it, but there are other sets that do stage, even at cheaper sets that do stage better, that really feel, more immersive and engaged in the music itself. And this one sort of is just very good at playback. And so I never really found a track that kind of blew me away on this one. And again, when I think back to what I thought about the original Aria and why I never picked it up, I think I sort of felt comfortable with that decision after I got to the end of all of my notes, and I'm like, yeah, I think I had the same problem with Snow Edition. There's just two little bits that kind of keep me from going all in on Snow Edition and picking it up over other sets, and these two were sort of right there. So again, thank you guys for tuning in, and I will see you next time.